Welcome, innovators, business owners, entrepreneurs, technology experts, academia, government R&D communities, and members of the North Carolina innovation ecosystem. This is Defense Technology Talks, hosted by the North Carolina Defense Technology Transition Office, or NC DefTech. This podcast will showcase various technologies with local and national experts who aim to solve complex national security problems. In the coming weeks, we will highlight North Carolinians with the potential to, or those that have positively contributed to enhancing the capabilities of our warfighters, law enforcement, and first responders. We will also feature government leaders in research and development who have helped shape the future in this domain. These podcasts are just one of the many free services provided by the North Carolina government to assist the North Carolina innovation ecosystem to thrive and provide solutions to our nation.
The Board of Science, Technology, and Innovation to, I guess, maybe re-energize the whole SBIR programs here in North Carolina and get more folks in North Carolina or in our ecosystem, which we know extends way beyond North Carolina, interested in the SBIR programs and submitting to those as well as X-Tech Search. So we decided that what we would do is take one of these coffee calls, and we have over 70 people on this coffee call right now, and bring together some quick discussions and quick experts from Department of Defense to talk about their SBIR programs. So we have a really great program today, and we're going to lead off with Dr. Matt Willis, who's the director of the Office of the Army Prize Competition. I kind of remember that as being X-Tech Search in the Army Applied SBIR program. Dr. Willis leads that portfolio, and it comprises over $275 million in annual research and development investments. Dr. Willis has a long career with the Army in the research side and also in ASOL, where he was, prior to this job, the Army Director for Laboratory Management, the Chief for Acquisition for the Joint Chemical, Biological, Radiological, and Nuclear Program. He also worked in the Analysis and Integration Office there, and goes on and on. He received his chemical undergrad degree from Cornell University and his master's and Ph.D. in chemical engineering from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Guess up there by where the Cyril is located, the Construction Engineering Research Lab. So maybe he did some work with them since we just had them down here last week. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to go on, Dr. Willis. I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you have a lot to cover. So over to you, sir. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks, Denny. I appreciate the intro. Excited to be here this morning. And yeah, I guess I'm not in North Carolina, but so part of my team is down there. But so as Denny mentioned, I work in Headquarters Department of the Army, specifically the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. So I'll get into that in a few moments. But one of the key things about the Army and our program, particularly the X-Tech portfolio and our SBIR and STTR program, is that we're managed in Headquarters Department of the Army because this is an Army-wide program, right? There's Army-wide applications, and so really excited again to share about these programs. I'd say that they're sister programs. X-Tech is kind of like opening the funnel and making it easier to work with the Army. I caught the tail end of some of the last presentations, and some of the folks were talking about some of the, accelerators or, ability to make it easier to understand, to digest what the military actually wants. And so that's really what the nexus of the X-Tech program is. And then the SBIR program is really focused on how can we invest in technology development for a specific technology need for our soldiers. So next slide, please. And I will say, actually, before I get into the content, I was going to say, but the North Carolina DefTech, again, appreciate organizing this. I know that there's been many companies within North Carolina and within your ecosystem that have been successful in both the X-Tech and SBIR programs. So again, excited to continue the messaging. So I really already spoke to this, right? But I think that one of the things that makes the Army unique amongst all of the other DoD SBIR programs and really across the government, right, is that our ultimate customer is the soldier. And so if you think, on a daily basis, the number of different technologies that a soldier either interacts with or uses, from vehicles to power and energy to health and fitness to rotorcraft to comms equipment to uniform. These are all the different things that the Army invests in through our science and technology program and also through our SBIR program. So there's a wide swath of technologies that we invest in. So what does that mean, from your perspective as the technology developer, is that more likely than not, there's an opportunity for engagement within the Army ecosystem, because we do have quite a broad, technology investment portfolio. And from the SBIR perspective, and really just in general, we've really changed the program quite significantly in the last few years, really to focus on, how can we leverage this program to make it easier to work with the Army? Certainly getting your foot in the door in the DoD can be challenging. We want to be able to, leverage innovation that's happening in the private sector in order to infuse these technologies into our soldiers' kit. And also, provide that connectivity between you, the technology innovator, and us and the soldiers. Again, so we can understand that oftentimes in technology development, of course, it's still R&D. There is iteration, but allowing that opportunity and that engagement is incredibly important. Next slide. So I'm sure everyone on the call here is at least loosely familiar with the SBIR program, but so in general, as I mentioned before, our program is led and coordinated in Headquarters Department of the Army, so I'm in Washington, D.C., and this is, deliberate, right? We're not necessarily managed out of one of our laboratories. Our laboratories execute a significant amount of the work, but we're located in Headquarters Department of the Army, so we can support Army customers both within our laboratories, but also within our program executive offices, our program managers, within Army Materiel Command, which would be the sustainment side of the house, et cetera, et cetera. So just from a fundamental standpoint, SBIR projects fund non-dilutive research and development funding. We provide a mechanism to have comprehensive feedback from Army experts, where we're trying to get away from the government is a black hole model, right? Where sometimes getting feedback, whether it's positive or negative, negative from at least a technical development standpoint, let's say, can be extremely valuable in your technology development lifecycle. And so we're trying to be more deliberate about how we can provide transparent and valuable feedback. We've been trying to infuse flexibility into the program as well, and I'll get into that in a few moments, but every SBIR award is not the same, right? If we're developing, a software system vice, a hardware platform, some of the timelines and the funding constraints might be different. So how can we, again, build flexibility and build an R&D program that makes sense for both the Army and for the technology developer? Also get into this in a few moments, but we've also been trying to be more deliberate about our business acquisition, or our business practices, let's say, right, where we're making it easier to work with the government. Historically, and this, we're not going to fix everything here, right, but, working with the government can be slow and cumbersome and take a long time, and that is not necessarily a feasible or realistic archetype for many small businesses that have a limited funding runway. So we've been trying to be more deliberate about, again, making it easier, making it quicker, and having contracting structures that are more beneficial to small businesses. And then finally, the networking, education, mentorship opportunities. For both XTech and the SBIR program, we run numerous different parallel programs to include an accelerator, of course, the technical and business assistance programs under SBIR. And these parallel programs, I know Bob will probably get into this for what they provide in the Navy, but they provide mechanisms for that collaboration both within the Army and then amongst your peers. All right, next slide. So again, within the Army, we've really taken a level set approach and infused flexibility into the SBIR program. So what does that mean? I mean, so what that means from an Army perspective is that SBIR program, it's a government-wide program. Essentially, sure, we're all tracking here, right? But for any government agency that executes more than $100 million of extramural research and development, they have to set aside at least 3.2% of that for the SBIR program. So within the Army, our total budget on an annual basis is around $325 million a year. The projects themselves are open to U.S.-based small businesses, so up to 500 employees, which is actually kind of a big business. That are at least 50% owned or operated by U.S. citizens. So from a programmatic standpoint, though, right? Within the Army, every SBIR project is not every SBIR project is not SBIR project. And so what does that mean? That means that, we are being very deliberate about understanding our customer. So from, let's say, a program executive office perspective, what do they need from a technology standpoint? What's their capability gap? When do they need it? Is the transition opportunity in 6 months or 6 years? And then notionally or nominally, how much should it cost? But that last one is a bit more challenging. But that information up front, so i.e. identifying a transition partner up front, and then being deliberate about how we shape our acquisition strategy is what's really different here. So that means that most projects follow, a typical phase 1 proof of concept, up to around $250,000 in 6 months. And then that can go into one or more phase 2 awards, which are the prototype demonstrations, typically 18 to 24 months and up to $1.95 million. But there's a lot of flexibility there. So certainly as you get engaged with the Army SBIR program, if you're selected for an award, there's a lot of flexibility there. And the reason for that, again, is that we are investing in technologies with a known transition partner and a known transition timeline. And so I think that's really important here, right? And I think, again, that's certainly something that distinguishes the DoD from most of the rest of the government, at least in the SBIR program, in that we're not investing in science for the sake of investing in science, right? We're investing in R&D to support technology development for capabilities that we're going to be transitioning in the future. So we're essentially our own customers here, right? So it's let's say a somewhat symbiotic relationship. And so that also goes into our topic release cycles. So within the Army, or I'll take a step back. Within the Department of Defense, there are 3 standard solicitation cycles throughout the year. The Army doesn't usually use those cycles. So we're releasing topics on a monthly basis. We typically have topics, projects coming out for solicitation. And while that might seem, let's say more chaotic or less predictable, there's a reason for that, right? Again, we are releasing projects based, again, on a deliberate transition strategy. So rest assured, we aren't trying to sow chaos into the program. We're trying to be more deliberate about making sure that if you're developing a technology for us under the SBIR program, that there is a transition opportunity at the end. And this, again, allows us to respond to critical Army capability needs. One of the challenges within the government or within the Department of Defense writ large, right, is through the traditional budgeting process. It takes at least 2 years to get to allocate money against an emerging requirement, right? So just through the program executive memorandum, the president's budget process, we won't get into that nightmare, but that's a significant challenge, though, from a technology development standpoint, right? So if I were to see an amazing technology today that would make a huge difference to the soldiers tomorrow, if I go through the traditional budgeting process, I can't put any resources on that technology for another 2 years, which is crazy, right? Because that technology will, in theory, change significantly between now and 2 years from now. So SBIR also allows us some of that flexibility where we can invest in technologies year of execution that are emerging. Of course, this also allows us to capitalize, again, as I just said, on small business innovation and increases flexibility. Next slide. And so I've already sort of spoken to this, and this might be a little bit in the weeds, but I'd like to keep it in forums like this because I think it tells a very important story, right? And that the story here is that an SBIR or STTR project, it's a path, right? It's an opportunity, it's a roadway, it's a journey. Oftentimes it might be a journey that is longer than we want to be, but we are still the government. So what I would say is, looking at this roadway on the bottom, our objective is this green dot on the right. So that's our transition opportunity to our Army customer, be it a program executive office, a PM, a lab, a special operator, the organic or inorganic, industrial base, etc. And so we essentially, again, identify what this need is and when this transition opportunity is and work our way backward. The other important thing here, and I said it on the last slide, is that there's a lot of flexibility in the SBIR program. So yes, typically projects start in a phase 1 proof of concept and then move into a phase 2 prototype. But we also release projects that jump straight to phase 2, so direct to phase 2 awards. We jump straight into a $1.9 million project if the proof of principle is already there, right? Oftentimes we can go into a sequential phase 2, and that allows us to buy down additional risk prior to transition or to develop a more functional prototype to do a demonstration to an Army customer. There's a lot of flexibility here. And again, in terms of the overall management of the program, we have these different portfolios that, again, encompass different transition partners, technical experts across the Army ecosystem, and acquisition professionals. And so all this, suffice to say that we're being very deliberate about how we programmatically structure the program to increase the potential for transition at the end. Next slide. So in terms of the ecosystem, so I know I said at the beginning, Army is very unique in that we invest in a lot of different things. That being said, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? So we invest in a lot of different technologies, but we've also identified a few key technology focus areas that we're prioritizing for the portfolio. And they're listed here on this chart. And this represents I'd say about 80-ish%. So we recognize that we can't possibly know everything, right? So there certainly are emerging technologies that might not fit within one of these buckets, and so we're still investing elsewhere. But how are these areas identified? So first and foremost, of course, they align with the National Defense Strategy and technology areas where the Army has needs. In addition to that, these areas represent technology areas where, in many cases, the private sector is outpacing the government. So within the Army, we have, depending on how you count, and Denny mentioned one of the labs earlier, but so depending on how you count, let's say 13 to 17 labs, 15,000 Army civilian scientists and engineers at these labs, another 14 or 15,000, on-site contractor support. So a huge number of people doing amazing cutting-edge research from, fundamental quantum science to, construction engineering research like the lab in Champaign. And they do great things, don't get me wrong. But that being said, there are certain technology areas where the private sector is outpacing the government. And there's also certain technology areas where there's a lot of private capital being infused in these areas because there are dual use opportunities, right? And so, we're trying to strategically invest most of our SBIR dollars in these areas that, again, represent places where you, as a technology developer, can be developing something that supports the government or supports the Army mission, but you also have a commercial sector application right there, right? Because, yes, we're making it easier to work with the government through the SBIR program, but, again, we can't fix the rest of the Army and the rest of the acquisition life cycle, which can take a long time. So that being said, these areas are still, I'd say, relatively broad in terms of a technology sense. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, autonomy, sensors, climate and clean tech, immersive and wearables. So that you can think like synthetic training environment or the IVAS, goggles that were just are being prototyped. The newest one that we're just standing up, contested logistics / sustainment S&T. So this is certainly an exciting one. Army Futures Command recently announced a new cross-functional team focusing on this domain. So again, this is an area that we're starting to broaden into. Next slide. So innovating how we do business. So I've spoken to this a lot, but I'd take one more second to foot stomp, right? That we recognize that in order to be innovative and to embrace an innovative culture, within the Army, we not only need to invest in innovative technologies, but we need to look inward to be innovative about how we do business. And so within the last year, we've reached full operating capability for our Army SBIR Contracting Center of Excellence, who so they execute currently all of our SBIR awards. We're looking into the potential for them to execute also our STTR awards. And really what they do is they make it, I'd say they allow us to push the easy button, let's say, right? So they really make it easier, transparent, quicker, to do business. And again, this is critical. If we are able within the Army to make an investment decision within, let's say, 45 to 60 days, but then it takes 6 months to execute a contract award, that's not really capitalizing on small business innovation. So I'll say some recent statistics, and of course these statistics are no promise for the future, but so year to date in FY23, the contracting COE has executed I think like 100 awards, both phase 1s and phase 2s. The average time for phase 1 awards has been 20 days, and that's days, not working days, so actual days, 20 days. The smallest was 1 day. I don't know how that worked, but 1 day. Phase 2s, up to $1.9 million. The average for those awards has been 30.6 days, and the quickest one was 2 days. So again, not that speed is everything, but it certainly, I think, demonstrates our commitment to realizing that if we're trying to be innovative and agile, we have to infuse that, throughout our business practices. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to take a pivot to the X-Tech program, which again are, I'd say, sister programs within our overarching portfolio, again, about how we can be more deliberate about working with innovative non-traditional small businesses. And so, a brief history that's not on this slide, but so essentially the X-Tech program actually was started in April of 2018, so 5 years ago. And it was really, to be honest, it was based on a conversation, a very brief conversation that I had with Dr. Bruce Jetty, who at the time was the Army Acquisition Executive. And he was actually commiserating about, his own history, right? So he was in the Army, in the military for, 30 years. He retired as a colonel. He spent a significant amount of that time in the Puzzle Palace in the Pentagon, working for the Army, understanding the intricacies of the Army. He retired. He started a small business, and he found that working with the Army and the DoD was horrible. Just like, very confusing, no clue who to connect with, no clue what exactly the DoD was interested in terms of technology development. And so his concern was, he had spent so long in the military that he was sort of able to navigate. But what about all these other businesses that are doing great things, doing innovative technology development, and they look at the DoD and they say no thanks, right? The juice isn't worth the squeeze. The value proposition isn't there. Oftentimes, even if you want to go participate in an industry day or a technology interchange meeting, obviously recently due to COVID they've been virtual, but prior to that, you would have to send a person or two to go on travel to the DoD to then learn about technology challenges, but there's no necessarily a funding opportunity at the end, right? You still have to go through the standard RFP process and all that stuff. So he really wanted to figure out how we can be deliberate about breaking down those barriers, changing the value proposition, really making a cost-neutral value proposition. So in other words, if the DoD asks you to come and travel, can we, make that at least less of a cost burden to small businesses? So under the X-Tech program, it's a prize competition. So it is a technically rigorous and highly competitive program. But under it, we provide, non-dilutive seed prizes, so cash prizes. We provide, again, similarly to the SBIR program, transparent, comprehensive feedback, direct exposure to Army stakeholders, to Army leadership, to users. Of course, a tremendous amount of networking opportunities, and again, alignment with our priorities and customers. And again, oftentimes I would equate the X-Tech program to opening the funnel. So how can we broaden the funnel to bring in new, innovative, non-traditional partners? And I've been focusing a lot on small businesses here, but the X-Tech program is actually open to, depending on the competition, it can be open to really anybody. So, we've run competitions for small businesses. We've done competitions for large businesses. We have, we're currently running a competition for international businesses. We've done ones for professors at historically black colleges and universities, for students. So it's really, again, you think about how we are broadening the funnel, as big as possible to bring in new ideas. All right, next slide.
Hey, Dr. Willis, I hate to ask you, but can you kind of maybe, conclude in the next 3 to 4 minutes so we can get the other folks time?
I'm very, very close.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, this slide gives a quick snapshot of where we are in the last 5 years. So again, as I mentioned, we've done lots of competitions, 24 different competitions, evaluated nearly 4,000 different technologies, provided nearly 30,000 evaluations. So that's information we're giving back to the companies, for free at no cost. Big thing though, I'd say if you divide the top right box by the bottom left box. So we've had almost $90 million in follow-on contracts while giving out about $18 million in cash prizes. So that's like a 5 or 6 to 1 in terms of follow-on awards to cash prizes. So again, this is about broadening the funnel. It's not just about giving away cash prizes, but it's how we can bring in more companies with these follow-on awards. Next slide. And so there are a few other initiatives that are coming on that I can certainly answer, if there are any questions afterwards. But these, again, are all aimed at how we can be more deliberate about bringing in new small businesses into the Army. Next slide. So a few particular ones that are coming up. There is an X-Tech competition, X-Tech Prime, and so that's going to provide opportunities for partnership between large integrators and small businesses. We also have the Cyber Catalyst program that's going on right now. This actually allows SBIR awards up to $15 million to develop a more functional prototype to facilitate transition. And then the tech marketplace will be another thing that's coming online in the next year or so, which will provide more transparency into the technology investments that the Army has made, in particular small businesses. Next slide. So, I think, the bottom line here is, we really want to work with you. We want new innovative ideas to be injected and infused into the Army. The easiest way to do that is, follow our social media, get on our mailing list. So xtech.army.mil is the X-Tech website. armycyber.army.mil is the Army website. There are a couple of opportunities here that are either opening soon or open now, in the case of the ones on the right. So with that, I will cede my time. Happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Defense Technology Talks, hosted by the North Carolina Defense Technology Transition Office, or DEFTech. The views expressed in this broadcast are solely those of the individual contributors. As indicated, DEFTech does not take responsibility for those statements or opinions and accepts no responsibility or liability for any inaccuracy or omissions reported during this program. The content and interviews are fair use for instructional purposes and to build awareness for the North Carolina innovation ecosystem. The full version of this presentation has been uploaded to our Mobilize platform. Mobilize is just another free service provided to you to access more national security and business collaboration opportunities. You can sign up for more information at deftech.nc.gov. Join us soon for the next podcast coming to a platform near you. DEFTech is a subsidiary of the North Carolina Military Business Center and receives its support from Fayetteville Technical Community College.